Hey, this is Jason Louv, and this is the Ultra Culture Podcast. And I just read the craziest, most encouraging, and most mind-blowing thing that I have in a long time, and I have to share it with you. This is from Dr. Dean Ornish's new book, which is called Undo It. Dean Ornish is a very, very well-respected doctor who has pioneered this field of lifestyle medicine, which is this mind-blowing idea that if you exercise and meditate and eat well and live a life full of love and social connection, that you'll be healthy. What a crazy, revolutionary idea. I know it sounds so controversial, and actually it has been. The medical community has been very, very, very resistant to this up until recently. Dean Ornish has been pivotal in pioneering this whole idea of lifestyle medicine. He's worked with everyone from Bill Clinton to Google to ex-surgeon generals, and he's actually got his new program so that it's covered by health insurance, and it's making major headway into changing the way that we look at medicine, and we'll look at medicine in the coming decades. And this new book, Undo It, is about how to live a lifestyle to not only avoid disease, but to actually reverse chronic disease and to extend your lifespan, to extend longevity way into the future. And this book is beyond mind-blowing. It sounds simple, but it's like every single sentence I have to unpack. There's some insane information about how, for instance, meditation lengthens your telomeres, or how going vegan can extend your lifespan for over 10 years. And by the way, this is not Deepak territory. This is extremely well-vetted science. Everything is impeccable in this book. Now, the thing that I wanted to share with you is he talks a lot in this book about meditation and the benefits of meditation. And you and I know, of course, that meditation and spirituality and spiritual practices have tremendous benefit. I mean, one of the reasons I use the word magic is because things like meditation can give you such an edge in life that it looks like magic. But, the rest of the world out there, they're slowly catching up. And so they're beginning to get interested in the idea of meditation. And, people use the buzzword mindfulness. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but people are really, really starting to wake up to the benefits of meditation. Now, of course, you and I both know that meditation can cover the whole wide gamut of spirituality and advanced spiritual practices. But check this out. I'm just going to read this section from Undo It. When you're sitting with your eyes closed, it looks like you're not doing very much. In fact, though, you're doing something quite powerful. For example, researchers at Harvard found that meditation alone can change the expression of genes that regulate inflammation, programmed cell death, apoptosis, and oxidative stress in only a few weeks. To look at gene expression, the researchers compared non-meditators with those taught to meditate for 8 weeks, and also with advanced meditators. The more the participants meditated, the more it beneficially changed the expression of these genes. In my experience, when people realize that meditation alone can actually change their genes, as well as provide so many other benefits, it is usually a powerful motivator for them to do this, as well as the other stress management techniques described here. Now, he's talking about things like yoga and stretching and eating a plant-based diet and surrounding yourself with a positive and loving community. So he carries on. Neuroplasticity is the ability of the adult brain to change its structure and function by generating new cells and pathways. When you eat well, move more, stress less, and love more, the part of your brain that controls memory, called the hippocampus, can get measurably bigger in only a few weeks. Let me pause and draw your attention back to that. In only a few weeks, your brain gets, your hippocampus, the hippocampus part of your brain, gets measurably bigger. That's insane. After 2 weeks. Okay, let's carry on. New research indicates that you can actually rewire your brain to have more positive responses, seeing the proverbial glass as half full instead of half empty. We can all learn to be more positive by practicing doing so. In other words, your higher cognitive function, your thoughts, can directly influence your amygdala, the animal part of your brain that houses emotions like fear and anger. That's, by the way, the part of the brain that controls the fight or flight impulse. I had the pleasure of speaking at a conference on happiness in Austin with Dr. Barbara Fredrickson, a leading researcher on the benefits of nurturing and reinforcing positive emotions. It was, not surprisingly, a happy experience. One way to nurture and reinforce positive emotions is to make a point of doing something, anything, every day, big or small, as an act of service without expecting anything in return. She calls these micro moments of positivity, ways to keep reinforcing positive emotions, to have a greater sense of well-being, and to provide a buffer against stress and depression. In one study, she and her colleagues trained a group of people for 6 weeks in what is beautifully called a loving kindness meditation, emphasizing kindness, love, and compassion. This resulted in an increase in positive emotions and social connectedness. This meditation also improved function of the vagus nerve, which connects the brain to the heart and other organs. The vagus nerve is part of the parasympathetic nervous system. Our sympathetic nervous system is stimulated during stress, but our parasympathetic nervous system relaxes the body. It counterbalances the effects of stress-induced overstimulation of the sympathetic nervous system. Among other benefits, this reduces inflammation and enables better control of blood sugar. Dr. Fredrickson examined associations among 3 factors: vagal tone, which is the balance between sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, positive emotions, and positive social connections, or individual reports of positivity resonance. Her team found that an increase in one of these factors was associated with increases in the others, what she calls an upward spiral. As she puts it, one way to think about this is that love creates health and health creates love. Taking time to learn the skills to self-generate positive emotions can help us become healthier, more social, more resilient versions of ourselves. In a related study, Dr. Richard Davidson, a pioneering neuroscientist at the University of Wisconsin, found that as little as 2 weeks training in compassion and loving-kindness meditation generated changes in brain circuitry linked to an increase in positive social behaviors like generosity. He said, well-being can be considered a life skill. If you practice, you can actually get better at it. Mindfulness is a form of meditation in which you observe your thoughts and feelings without judgment. According to Dr. Davidson, this form of mental training gives you the wherewithal to pause, observe how easily the mind can exaggerate the severity of a setback, note that it is an interesting mental process, and resist getting drawn into the abyss. Meditation causes a part of your thinking brain, the left prefrontal cortex, to send inhibitory signals to your amygdala, the emotional part of your brain that causes you to feel anger and fear. In short, we have more control over how we respond to the world than we once believed. Our thinking brain sometimes can overcome our emotional brain, and practice makes perfect. In another study, those who meditated for about 30 minutes a day for only 8 weeks had measurable increases in brain size in their hippocampus, leading to improved memory, and decreases in brain size in their amygdala, causing a reduction in anger and fear. Knowing that you can beneficially change your brain and the expression of your genes, plus so many other benefits in only 2 months by just meditating for a half hour daily is very inspiring. Well, yes, it's very inspiring. This is kind of a Mr. Rogers way to put it, but that's great. Dean Ornish is amazing. This is a great book. And I just want to, let's just back up for a second. Let's just think about this. Just think about it. If you meditate for half an hour a day, after 2 weeks, your hippocampus is larger. That's the part of your brain, again, that is associated with memory. So your memory improves drastically. And also, if you keep this up for 8 weeks, these studies show, and in addition to, I'm sure, lots of other benefits, but these studies specifically show that if you meditate for half an hour for 8 weeks, your hippocampus grows and your amygdala shrinks. So you have better memory, and your fight-flight response, your anger and fear, and all the stuff that leads to all the bad decisions you've ever made in your entire life, and me too, that part shrinks. And not only that, but your genes change their expression. I mean, you're changing your genetics. The whole field of epigenetics and genetic change and self-willed genetic change is frankly fascinating to me, because science is beginning to show that what we do can change our genes. Again, epigenetics, which means that it not only improves our life, but that it will improve the lives of our offspring and their offspring on into the infinite future. Meaning, it's not just about wellness. We have a freaking duty to do it, because the decisions you make now affect everyone who will come through you, your entire genetic lineage into the future, right? So we have that duty to them. Get it right. Now, these are just some of the benefits of meditation. These are just a few studies that we're talking about. And of course, there are new studies coming out all the time as people increasingly begin to realize that this is not just hippie woo-woo stuff. This is life or death, right? That's how important meditation is. But, I've seen other studies. For instance, there was one done around 2012 that suggested, pretty strongly that meditation improves the gyration of the brain. Okay, what is gyration? That's a fancy way of saying the crinkliness of the brain, the folds of the brain on its surface. And there is, of course, a very, very positive correlation between how gyrated or crinkly your brain is and how smart you are. So we know, for instance, that actually dolphins have way more gyrated brains than human beings. I believe elephants do as well, which makes you think a bit. But that aside, in the study, they looked at long-term meditators, and they saw that particularly long-term advanced meditators had remarkably more gyrated and larger brains than those who were not meditating. Do you think that this might be a good way to not only live an amazing life, but have an edge in every single thing that you do, whether it's business or relationships or creativity or just your connection with yourself and with whatever you believe the sacred to be and with the people around you? In fact, can you think of anything that would have a larger compound effect on improving every single aspect of your life more than, something that can make your brain grow, right? Outside of some chemical way of doing this, which God knows what the side effects of that would be. And we know that nootropics don't do that, right? So, do you think that this might be an important key to life? Now, here's the thing also. So right now, everyone's into meditation, right? It's very, very trendy, but the word they use is mindfulness. And this always I don't know about you, but this drives me crazy, right? Because I'm not crazy. Let me back up. I'm too calm for meditation to have emotions like that. But it makes me raise an eyebrow, because mindfulness is really a buzzword. And when you really look at it, it's kind of this buzzword that people can layer any meaning they want into. And so, it doesn't sound scary. It sounds nice, but usually when you look at it, they're describing something like what Dean Ornish just described, which is monitoring the flow of your thoughts. Okay, now that's a great practice in general, but it's certainly not the only practice. And, real Buddhist mindfulness, Vipassana, is much, much more advanced, more strenuous. It's about monitoring energy flows in the body, monitoring the process of time and change, and Tibetan techniques become even more complex from that than that. And most importantly, real meditation. I mean, look, you probably know this already, because a lot of the people who follow me, have a good working knowledge of this stuff. But when you look at real yogic meditation, and I mean the stuff that you see in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, or that was codified in India in the Middle Ages, real yoga, single-pointed focus meditation, or even Raja Yoga, and the 8 limbs of yoga, asana, pranayama, dharana, dhyana. Look, let's just be honest. This stuff is outside of the attention span of most people. There have been studies, actually, there are studies mentioned in this book just before the section that I read, that the average human being now has an attention span of 8 seconds. Now, this is a person in a Western society surrounded by electronic media. 8 seconds. You know how long the attention span of a goldfish is? 9 seconds. No joke, right? This is where we're at now as a culture. So do you think that the average person has the attention span to do things like real meditation, which is not mindfulness, by the way, but things like Raja Yoga? So asana, posture, pranayama, breathing, dharana, dhyana, focus, concentration, meditation, samadhi, single point in consciousness. This is a real strength. It's almost athletic. But by the same token, what do you, if those are what I just read, if that's the benefit of some basic mindfulness, quote unquote, meditation, what do you think the benefits of real meditation are? I mean, think about it, right? Half an hour of strenuous one point of concentration held, of mastering asana, pranayama, all these techniques. Do you think that after a few weeks of that, you might be able to do things that other people might consider a little magical? I think so. So I'm guessing that probably like me, you've gone through life having to defend some of the stuff that you're into, whether it's meditation or spirituality or magic or woo-woo stuff. If you're like me, you probably had to kind of keep some of this on the down low, or just spend a lot of time deflecting sarcasm or raised eyebrows or judgment, or, depending on where you live in the world, potentially threats from other people, right? But let's think about what I just read. How's that for some real tangible demonstration of the benefit of what we're doing here? I mean, I can't think of it getting that much more potent. And I'm excited that the mainstream, if you will, is starting to catch up with us finally. Of course, by the time they catch up with us, we'll be so far ahead that, they'll still be scrambling to figure out what's going on. And what's going on, of course, is our evolution. And that's why I do this podcast. That's why I put all of my waking hours into building all this stuff for you, because I want us to evolve. We need it. We need it. The planet needs evolved people. The planet needs you. I say it on every podcast now. The planet needs you at your most evolved and your best and your largest and most crinkly and most evolved brain. So let's just think about this, right, for a second. Now, I'm just going to use the phrase meditation, but let's under the blanket term of meditation, let's talk about not only the mindfulness that the public is talking about, but real Raja Yoga, Hindu yoga, or Buddhist techniques like Vipassana. Let's also put in things like Hermetic Magic, which really is a form of meditation. It's, guided meditation, guided imagery meditation in most cases. And everything else that we talk about at this podcast and everything else that I talk about at magick.me. Let's put all of that under the umbrella term of meditation, just for convenience's sake. And let's think about this for a second. I mean, what are the real tangible benefits of this? Okay, well, number one, right, as we've just talked about, improving your brain, right? Your brain structure changes. The parts that you want get bigger, and the parts that lead to crappy life decisions get smaller, and genes change, all right? Now, what does that mean? It means you're going to be smart as hell the more you do this stuff. And of course, what that really means is this is the number one most important skill that you need, no matter what it is you do in life. And that's why this is truly something that, I've invested so much in bringing out, because it's like, no matter who you are, you're going to massively benefit from this. And it's not just in terms of being smart, right? It's also in terms of being healthy. Right. So what, some of the stuff that I've just shared and what people are beginning to really realize is this isn't just nice to have, it's kind of necessary for health. Right. So what that means is, if you want to keep your health in check, now, of course, I'm not a doctor, so don't, I'm not making any recommendations one way or the other. But what I will share is that, this is not controversial at all. You can go and read all the news stories that are being written about this, or look at the studies. If you want to keep healthy, particularly as the years go on, and that includes things like blood pressure and stress levels, inflammation, the stuff that we were mentioning, and in some cases, delaying, or even reversing potentially certain diseases, you must meditate, right? It's not a should, it's a must. Western medicine is really oriented towards treating symptoms, right? And I have no axe to grind against Western medicine, but it's very symptom based, right? But the whole idea of lifestyle medicine is the idea of not having to have the symptom in the first place, right? So if you don't want to have the symptom in the first place, you must meditate, right? And so what does that really mean? Now, I'm not a doctor. I'm not making any medical recommendations one way or the other, but the science is there. If you want to live a healthy life, if you want to potentially save your life, meditation as part of a larger package of eating well and exercising and de-stressing and all this stuff works synergistically. It's a must, right? Okay, well, so you're going to be smarter, you're going to be healthier, you're going to live longer potentially. Okay, great, but I mean, what about your day-to-day life, right? Well, obviously, what is meditation going to do for you? You're going to feel good, you're going to feel happy, you're going to feel grateful, you're going to feel joyous in a way that, frankly, and I can say this with no reservation after having been a meditator for 20 years, in a way that nothing else can really provide for you in the same way, right? So what that means is that you're going to, particularly once you get good at meditation, once you can get into flow states and bliss states, and meditating for, let's say, an hour a day is not only no big deal for you, but is a must. Like you don't go a day skipping that. When you get to that state, you get more joy from meditation than you will ever get from, I don't know, playing video games, surfing the internet, watching TV, watching sports, and frankly, in some cases, even sex, although frankly, it also makes sex a lot better. We don't have to go there, but focus goes a long way. So what that really means is, of course, that what does it take to learn meditation, right? Like a few dollars, lunch money, right? A few, or maybe more, like whatever it, it's a very insignificant investment of money to learn meditation, and then you have a skill that gives you infinite bliss and joy on tap forever for free wherever you are in the world, no matter what your life circumstances are, right? And it's not like you have to top it up. Once you know it, and you just have to stay in practice, right? So, and I can say that without any reservation. 20 years of meditating, everything else in the world is transient. Meditation is not, in a sense, right? It's a way of investing in joy, building a sense of well-being that not only lasts, but it can never be taken from you, and it spills over into every other area of your life, right? And by the way, I mean, what else can meditation do? I mean, one more point, not to harp on this too much. I mean, I could talk for hours about all the benefits, but let's keep it short here. Think meditation, not even just in a Hallmark card way, but meditation and spiritual practice, all this stuff makes you a better person, right? And I don't mean that in an abstract way. I mean that very literally, right? It makes you a calm, open, compassionate, and most of all, hear me very carefully on this, a non-reactive person, right? Non-reactive more and more. So in short, that means you become a person that people want to be around. And that positively affects your relationships, whether it's with your relatives, your kids, your significant other, or maybe you don't have a significant other currently and you'd like to attract that person into your life by, a great way to do that is by having a peaceful and open and loving vibe. Meditation does improves all of these relationships. It allows you to take a step back from your internal dialogue and actually see the world and see the person in front of you instead of being caught up in the chattering story in your head. I mean, have you ever been in a relationship, for instance? I certainly have, where it's just a constant cycle of reaction. You say something, it triggers the other person. They say something, it triggers you. It's constant reaction. You react to them, they react to you. Next thing you know, you're fighting. Or maybe not even fighting openly, but just it turns into an endless stream of sarcastic comments or little backbiting gestures, things like this. That's a terrible place to be. That's a terrible place to be, right? That's no fun, right? And what is this caused by the way? This is caused by going into the amygdala. It's going into the fight or flight part of the brain. It's caused by seeing your significant other as potentially a source of threat. right? Even if that's not real, even if that's not part of reality, it's just that you're reacting to them as if they were because you're running on your, dinosaur brain. So, as we've talked about, if meditation can shrink the amygdala, and believe you me, it does, then how do you think that this improves all of the relationships in your life? And what is your life, by the way, besides the quality of your relationships? What else truly matters? Money, yes, health definitely is probably number one, but besides your health, your relationships, right? What else? Stuff, money, that stuff doesn't matter, right? It matters, but it's only a set of tools. Money is just tools. Like all this stuff, it's just tools for having relationships with other people. That's the way that I see it, at least. And, Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, two of the richest men in the world, recently, just a few weeks ago, put out kind of a statement where Bill Gates and Buffett shared that they had finalized what they believed to be the ultimate metric of success, of whether you were living a successful life or not. And it was real simple, and it was kind of beautiful, right? Very beautiful. It was just, do the people that you care about love you back? If the answer is yes, you're living a successful life. Now, do you think that the quality of your relationships, which really is the quality of your reactivity, might have an effect on that? You too could be as emotionally wealthy as Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and beyond, right? Because there are tons of billionaires in the world who haven't figured that out and live a life of reaction and drinking and substance abuse and buying the next thing and going to the next ski resort or, whatever crazy thing that they constantly do to distract themselves from the gnawing void at the center of their life, right? That's what the movie Citizen Kane is about. You can be richer than all those people in only a half hour a day. Now, if most of the meditation that's floating out there in the world is just kind of this watered down mindfulness, and it actually turns out to be, and actually, surprisingly enough, turns out to be quite difficult to learn real meditation techniques because most of the most popular techniques are just super, super watered down on all sides of the fence. Well, then how do you learn it? Well, as you likely already know, at magick.me, I have everything there. There is a course on magick.me referred to as Hardcore Meditation that lists the entire 8 limbs of yoga step by step. That's Raja Yoga. That will teach you everything from yama and niyama, which is how to conduct your life to be a powerful meditator, to asana, posture, pranayama, deep breathing techniques, to pratyahara, withdrawing your senses, and then proceeding to dharana and dhyana and samadhi, which is attaining one point in consciousness. Of course, it's not just that, but we have everything, every single type of spiritual practice you can name, whether it's hermetic magic, chaos magic, astral travel, or let's put it this way, all the stuff that advanced meditators can do once they get really skilled at meditation, because meditation doesn't just end with one point of consciousness. That's the beginning. Then you can start learning all this other stuff. It's all there, right? Everything you need to learn to really seriously master this skill, and not in some corporate mindfulness training way, in the real way, in the traditional way. I've been trained in this stuff. I learned this stuff in the Himalayas. I learned this stuff in Nepal. I learned this stuff from meditation masters here. I've been at it for 20 years, not just meditation, but of course, all these other spiritual practices, magic, and all of that. I know what I'm talking about, okay? Now, I might not know what I'm talking about in all areas of life. You are way better at certain things than I will ever be. And there are certain areas of my life in which I'm constantly just stubbing my toe. But in this area of life, I know what I'm talking about. And I can say that with absolute confidence. It's there. It's provided. I have the goods. Everything is there, easily accessible and taught in a step-by-step structure so that you can really hone down and master this skill in a way that just isn't easily accessible for most people. So when you subscribe to magick.me, which is magick.me, when you subscribe, you get not only access to the meditation course, but you get I believe over at this point, 16, 17 different courses on everything under the sun. You also get access to the office hours sessions, which have been going incredibly well. By the way, we just had one last Saturday, and the next one is coming up Saturday after this Saturday. And I've been taking between 3 and 5 hours to just sit with people and work with them one-on-one and guide them in their practice and look at what's happening in their life. And in many cases, turn people's lives around on a dime. We had a really, really profoundly powerful session last Saturday where I was working with somebody who had been through, many years of substance abuse and was now coming back to trying to get into clear meditative focus and fully back into the body. I'm hoping to maybe at some point, with people's permission, release some of these sessions on the podcast because they've been, certainly for me, profoundly moving and powerful, and I think for everyone available. So for Magick.me subscribers, you get access to that. It's every other week. I may increase the frequency, and that feature is going to be much more expensive very shortly. But for now, it's available as part of the general subscription package. So get it while you can, because if you're grandfathered in, the price will not raise on you. Okay, so you get that. You get the courses, you get the office hours, you get access to the Magician's Workshop, which is a weekly step-by-step training program that makes sense and guides you through all of these practices so that you can master all of them in a very short period of time. And you also get access to the Discord with all the other students who are constantly talking about these practices and sharing community and doing experiments, and having back and forth. It's an incredible community, and it's an incredible school that's being built up with some really lots of goodwill. People are really, really enjoying it, and I'm having a lot of fun doing it. And particularly, I think in the last month or two since I've been doing these office hours, I've just gotten such a feeling of personal fulfillment from really helping people, right? Okay, so that's all there. And, let's say you sign up and you don't like it. All right, well, things happen. But of course, that's, everything that's there is so amazing, such an incredible amount of value that I don't expect that to happen for anybody. Nobody who signs up for this really ever asks for their money back. But let's say just on a fluke, let's say that you just decided you didn't like it. Well, that's fine. There's zero risk. If you contact our support team before watching your 7th unit, we will refund 100% of your money, no questions asked. That actually costs us money because we have to do chargebacks and all that, and pay Stripe or PayPal a handling fee for that. But I'm happy to offer that because nobody ever asks for their money back, right? But I'm happy to make that available. It's no questions back if you want your money back. I believe in it that much, and I want people to experience it without any, hesitation. I want people to jump in and really experience. So it's all available like that. Of course, you can cancel at any time, and no questions asked. It's all there. So the site is magick.me, magick.me, and I'm looking forward to talking to you in office hours. And man, just think about it. With the right amount of meditation, our brains will all be growing and we'll be hanging out together. What an amazing concept. Now, the site is magick.me, magick.me. I can't wait to see you in class, particularly in the office hours. And I can't wait to meet the super-brained, advanced meditator, superhuman version of you in 3 months, 6 months, a year. Who knows? Meditation really has no end. It just keeps improving, and that goes for all spiritual practices. It's just better and better all the time. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, Jason, for the love of God, just get to the podcast already. Okay, we're here. Worry not. So the podcast this week is a recording of a speech that I gave in Seattle on the release of my book, John Dee and the Empire of Angels. This was I think a really good speech in which I cover the 7 things that we can learn about magic and the world from John Dee and Edward Kelly. This is a very, very high level talk about the very highest registers of Hermetic magic. It was given at Mortlake Company, which is a great occult bookstore in Seattle, to a very, very advanced audience. The people who go to this frequent that store, and the what used to be called the Esoteric Book Conference. They're very, very high level. This is probably the spot in America for people who are really interested in this stuff to congregate. So I was firing on all cylinders here. I was having to meet a higher standard. And so this was, available on YouTube, but luckily I've cleaned it up. I have substantially improved the audio. There's still a little bit of, it's not perfect. It was recorded, off a jacket mic in just an art gallery space. But the talk is really good. And while I'm preparing new interviews, I want to make sure that I get a podcast out this week. So I'm bringing you this talk, which, it's a great one. It really hits all the bases about what is most important about magic and hermetic magic and how hermetic magic has shaped world history. Now, this talk was given as part of a 2-day series. This talk was given the first night. It was a free event that was open to the public. The second day, which I reference at one point in this talk, was a full day-long workshop on Enochian Magick and scrying the Enochian Aethers. You're in luck. This full class was recorded and it's reproduced and it's available as part of a much wider package of lots and lots of course material at magick.me. It's packaged in a course called Entering the Enochian Universe, and you get access to that if you're a magick.me subscriber. So after you are finished listening to this podcast, you can go to magick.me and get access to the entire day-long, 3 or 4 hours course on actually doing Enochian Magick, and all the basics are laid out there if you dare. So, along with everything else. Also, just as a note, on the off chance that you haven't got a copy of John Dee and the Empire of Angels, which is my new book, which is what I'm talking about in this speech, I just saw that it's on sale on Amazon right now. They've already taken 33% off, and then I saw that they've added another coupon, like at one of those clip out coupons that Amazon does, for even more off. So it's close to half off now at this point. Not quite half off, but it's close to half off. That's an incredible deal. That's the best deal that I've seen people selling the book for ever. And I don't know how this works with Amazon. I don't know, what their schedule is for doing this. So I don't know how long this deal is going to last, but it's there right now. So go and grab the book for, peanuts if you haven't got one already, or get one for someone else. All right. So you now have the secrets of an expanding brain, of living a longer life, of being healthier, of having better relationships, better sex, and the arcane art of Enochian Magick. I bring all this stuff to you. And with no further ado, let's do the talk. Hey, how's it going? I'm Jason. Thank you for coming. We have a full house. I'm super excited. And so tonight we're going to be talking about the seven things we can learn about magic and reality from Dr. John Dee, or 007 things you can learn about reality from Dr. John Dee, as Dee was the original 007. So I'm going to talk for about an hour, and we don't have too much more time. And then I'll take questions, and then we'll do book signing for anyone who wants to grab a book. And in this talk, I'm not just going to be talking at you, because I hate just talking at people. We're going to be talking about magic, but we're also going to be doing magic. So, which means we're going to do some, you could call them guided visualizations. And I'm going to walk you through a few things to get you ready to talk about warping reality and alchemically fuddling with the nature of existence, which is my favorite topics. So the subject of our talk is Dr. John Dee, who, of course, is the individual that I wrote this book about, John Dee and the Empire of Angels. First of all, who is Dr. Dee, and why is Dr. Dee important? So what? So Dr. Dee was an alchemist who lived in the 16th century. He was an early scientist. He was an astrologer. He was the scientific advisor to Elizabeth I in primarily the 1550 or 1560s, 1570s, 1580s. He predates the birth of modern science. So he predates Isaac Newton and people like this.
However, he is one of the last true scientists to assess the idea of magic and take it seriously as I would say a branch of the sciences, but this was before things were separated. It's when magic and science and alchemy and astrology and astronomy and all these things were seen as one thing, and that was just the study of reality. What is reality? Why are we here? And John Dee happens to be probably the most important figure of the entire Western esoteric tradition. He's the guy that we get modern magic from, the guy that we get the core of the Golden Dawn, Rosicrucianism, Freemasonry, Thelema, and possibly all the way into the modern world with Satanism and even witchcraft. So he's the guy. If you're interested in the occult, as I assume you all are because you're all here, he's the guy. He's the big progenitor of the entire field. Okay, now again, so what? The occult. Okay, great. John Dee is also the guy that invented the phrase the British Empire. He's the guy that came up with not just the schematics and the math and the imperial planning necessary to turn England from a country that was a tiny, impoverished, what we might call developing country, into the greatest empire the world has ever known, the empire on which the sun never sets, so-called because at the height of the empire, there was literally nowhere in the entire world during which the sun was not shining. And what that means is that John Dee is kind of the guy who laid down the blueprint, if you will, for the world that we find ourselves in now. Because, of course, from the British Empire, we get the American Empire and global capitalism, the global empire. The empire never ended, as Philip K. Dick put it. And more interestingly than that, Dee claimed that the idea for empire was given to him by the Archangel Michael because he was a full-time practicing occultist. And when we study Dee, we understand that the idea of magic and the occult is fundamentally wrapped up with not just kind of, now we know magic and the occult is kind of an outsider pursuit. It's something that, that we've all found our way to, looking on the fringes of our culture. But when you look at the higher echelons of world history, you see that it has been central to the construction of everything. So when we're studying Dee, we're studying the guy who wrote the computer code of the modern world with the help of angels. So now that that's gone by, close your eyes. And I want you to feel a blue light coming up from the tips of your feet, a blue light that carries relaxation, spreading up from your toes to the soles of your feet and your ankles, and up your lower legs, and through your knees, and through your upper legs, pelvis, abdomen, front of your abdomen, your lower back, bringing relaxation, bliss, peace, contentment, at one-ment, up through the front of your chest, your upper back, and then starting at your fingertips, spreading up your fingers through your hands, wrists, lower arms, elbows, upper arms, shoulders, collarbone, the front of your neck, back of your neck, the front of your face, back of your head, ears, and finally to the very tippy top of your skull, your crown chakra. And now you find yourself in the rainforest with no humans, nothing but perfect, pristine, clean, clear nature. And this is the Garden of Eden. See the deep, verdant leaves and vines and the trees. There might be a hint of maybe some birds off in the distance, but nothing is moving too much. There's dew collected on the leaves, a little bit of light misting rain. You can smell the clean scent of rain having just recently fallen. You feel a very, very light breeze playing on your backs of your hands. Now, the Garden of Eden is our state at all times. It is the dawn of humanity. It is the end of humanity. It is where we started and where we are going. And more than that, it is where we already are. Garden of Eden is at all times and at all places in one single shining instance. It encapsulates all time and all history and all space. And you might be hearing in your head your own voice, the voice that perhaps is not so sure about this, the voice that doubts perhaps that we are in the Garden of Eden and will be in the Garden of Eden and have always been in the Garden of Eden. It's in the trees. It's coming. The voice you're hearing is the voice of fear, the voice of doubt, the voice of the deceiver, the voice that tells us that we are not enlightened and the crown is not in the kingdom, as the kingdom is not in the crown. And that is the only thing that is keeping you from perceiving the divine perfection of existence now. So, when you're ready, let go of it and know where you are. An apocalypse means, in Greek, lifting the veil. And the veil is the perceptual filter that has kept you from perceiving the essence of reality your entire life. And that is the veil that is lifted by Enochian Magick, bit by bit, until you remember where you are. So, when you're ready, return to your body, feel the backs of your hands, and slowly begin to come back to here and now, which is exactly where you just were. So the topic of our talk is the 007 things that John Dee can teach us about magic and reality. That's just the prelude. So the first thing that John Dee can teach us about magic and the nature of reality is quite simple. It's that magic is real. And not only is magic real, but magic can and has many times changed the world. So what is magic? A lot of you watching this may have some idea what magic is or may have experimented with it yourself. Magic is very simple. Magic is the ability of human beings to extrude their consciousness and their will into existence through any means necessary. Now, that often includes ritual procedures and parameters. It includes what we might recognize as ceremonial magic, but really it extends to any human activity whatsoever. Magic, as I've come to learn in the last 20 years of doing it, is not quite what they say it is in the books. Magic is a spontaneously emergent principle of human consciousness and of the universe itself. It just happens. It's something that we become aware of. And it's a process that we learn to participate in. Now, every time somebody asks me what magic is, I give a different definition of what it is. But every time I give a definition, just bear in mind, that's the 100% accurate definition of what magic is. And it's always the 100% accurate definition of what magic is. And so if I give you a different definition of magic later in this talk, that will be the 100% accurate definition of what magic is. So magic is the art and science, as Crowley put it, of causing change in conformity with will. It is the art and science, as Dion Fortune put it, of causing change in consciousness in conformity with will. And I think that's probably a better way to look at it. It's a way of tuning our consciousness. And this is, by the way, the 100% accurate definition of what magic is. It's a way of tuning our consciousness to change band from normally we focus on the ritual of waking up, going to work, sitting in a car, coming home, watching TV, interacting with the people closest to us. That's our ritual. But that's just one possible configuration of human consciousness in the entire universe, which is infinite. So magic allows us to change the tuning, to zero in and focus on something else, whether that's what we're trying to extrude into the world, or whether it's perhaps contacting supernatural beings like angels, which is what John Dee and Edward Kelly did. Now, people have been doing magic since the dawn of history. Like I said, in my original 100% accurate definition of what magic is, it is a spontaneously emergent principle of human consciousness. People have been doing it since the dawn of history. People were doing it in the caves. People were doing it as Paleolithic shamans. People are doing it now through the media, through neurolinguistic programming, through social media. Everyone's trying to impose their will on the world. And in the 16th century, it was done through very technical procedures of scrying and trying to contact angels and higher beings in order to seek their aid and petition their aid in changing reality. And this is something that's happened many times. In the 16th century, John Dee and Edward Kelly contacted the angels and spent 10 years. Now, Dee, of course, is the scientist I've told you about. Edward Kelly is the psychic or scryer that he worked with. And together they formed a working partnership and spent almost 10 years doing nothing but talking to angels that claimed to give them the original language of humanity that was spoken before the fall from the Garden of Eden. Angels that gave them, or gave Dee, the idea for a British Empire. Angels that gave them the schematics for creating a new and totalizing new world order, for lack of a better word, which we'll touch on in a second. And so one of the reasons that I've written this book is to show that magic has been at the heart not only of empire, but it's been the causal engine behind things like the creation of the US space program through Jack Parsons, who also practiced Dee and Kelly's magic and Crowley's magic. It's been behind all kinds of political efforts. We've seen it in action in geopolitics in the last few years, whether it was people doing magic on the side or of the Republican Party or against the Republican Party. We saw it in the Ukrainian occultist Alexander Dugin, who is an advisor to Vladimir Putin, directly doing occult activities to influence reality in the direction of shifting the geopolitical locus of control to Russia. So this is not just simply a historical subject. This has been going on since the beginning of time. And so it's no surprise that governments have investigated this, and that people like John Dee, again, the original 007, would have been instrumental in creating the British secret societies, of course, the British secret societies, but also the British secret services, MI5 and MI6, and the ones that later Crowley and Gurdjieff and Blavatsky participated in. So in studying Dee and studying magic, we're not just studying some type of kooky outsider art activity. We're really studying the secret history of the world. It's often overlooked because it's so strange. And they obviously did not teach you this history in school because it's so strange. And it's also a history that once you fully understand it, you begin to understand how up for grabs the nature of reality is. You begin to understand how anybody theoretically can change the course of world history simply by applying a few occult principles. A very dangerous idea that I'm perhaps unwisely bringing out to the public right now. But that's me. That seems to be what I'm doing with my life right now. So, if magic is real, what now? So, principle number 2 we can learn from the work of John Dee and Edward Kelly. Angels are real, or real in a sense. So, this is something that we are quite skeptical about in the modern world. The existence of supernatural beings, the existence of extra-human intelligences, praeter-human intelligences. But to understand what angels are, we need to get past the Hallmark card version of it and understand how they were spoken of in the Elizabethan time period. When we're talking about angels, we're not talking about, like something from a WB show, an angel manifesting with wings I do an occult ritual and an angel manifests a visible appearance right there with a flaming sword and tells me to go to church more. When we're talking about angels, we're talking about living information. We're talking about beings that live in the world of mind, beings that live, that can be contacted perhaps through dreams altered states of consciousness, whether that's the psychedelic experience or in a better form of that, a more controlled form, is the magical and occult experience. Doing magical rituals to briefly alter consciousness for short periods of time that leave us open to interacting with those other levels of reality. So if you've ever done an occult ritual, raise your hand and say aye. Okay, so about half of you. And if you've ever been interested in doing an occult ritual, raise your hand, and including if you've done one, raise your hand and say aye. Okay, so the whole room. So what is magic? Well, okay, so this is the 100% accurate definition of exactly what magic is. Magic is a set of, and we're going to be doing some tomorrow, by the way. It's a set of rituals or a set of ritual procedure that are very precise. It really is an art and a science that is designed to shift your consciousness for brief periods of time from the material world to the world that we might consider the world of dreams, or the world of imagination, so-called, or the world of intuition and inspiration and perhaps slight hypnotic trance, in order to interact with reality as it is on those levels. Now, we're always interacting with that level all the time. So if you've ever been walking down the street and suddenly a genius idea popped into your head, whether that's an idea for something that you should write, or something that you should do with your life, or just a good, like a good line or something like that. Something you should say to somebody in your life to help something go in your life. Well, then you've interacted directly with that plane of existence. You've interacted with, the astral world, as magicians call it, and but very briefly. And so we're always interacting with this level of reality all the time. When we do magical ritual, we heighten our focus and shift our reality solely to that level of existence, to interact with it exclusively for short periods of time. And the reason that it's short periods of time is otherwise you get too ungrounded. There's lots of people, and perhaps some of you know people like this, who become purely mystic and try to, do psychedelics all the time and go totally kind of off the deep end. And that's not the path of magic. The path of magic is set and setting, as Timothy Leary called it. Ritual parameters for shifting into magical consciousness for short periods of time and then coming back so that you can get on with the rest of your life with just what you wanted, just the specific information that you wanted, without getting overloaded by something like, for instance, 6 hours of tripping on psilocybin mushrooms, which is not particularly productive sometimes. Okay. So this is where we meet angels. And so to go back to our example, if you have suddenly had a moment of inspiration where a brilliant idea popped into your head and you have no idea where that came from, people today might say, well, that's the unconscious mind. Elizabethans, people in John Dee's time, would say, well, this is angels. This is how angels manifest, right? Angels live in the world of ideas. The Elizabethans believed, as they did in the Middle Ages, that there were angels set over everything in the material world. So each person has a guardian angel. As William Blake and Emanuel Swedenborg so poetically put it, there's an angel over the head of every blade of grass telling it, grow, grow, right? So the Elizabethan conception of the world is that angels basically are the clockwork mechanism. It's the graded intelligence that's set over everything in the manifest world to make it work. Now, in the Elizabethan world, the other idea was that angels were the next level of evolution above humans, right? So if you imagine God at the top of the scale of existence, below God you would have angels, below angels you would have human beings, and below human beings you would have the animals. And then, of course, below the animals you would have minerals or plants, and then minerals, and then below that you would have the demonic realms. But the idea, this was called the Great Chain of Being, and this was the hierarchy running the entire universe, which was perfect and wonderful, and the only thing that ever caused chaos to happen in it was human sin, and humans taking unwise actions. So the idea of Elizabethan magic, which is the idea that underpins really all magic today, is that if humans are to evolve, the best way to do that is by contacting the next layer of beings above human beings, which is angels. So angels don't have bodies, but they can be contacted in ways that, like I was just talking about, through occult ritual, through dreams, inspiration, even perhaps through poetry and art. And the idea there being that, as I've congratulated you for, as you first came in, that we're on an upward arc of evolution, that we are evolving. We've gone through minerals and animals and the ranks of humans, and now to get to the next level, we should speak to the next rank of beings above us, which is angels. And this is exactly what John Dee set out to do, and it's exactly what the Western Hermetic tradition has set out to do, and all of the magicians since, in most of them. And that is to repair the fallen nature of humanity. Human beings are fallen. They are, we're not really that smart. We don't really have that many capabilities. We get about 70 years, give or take, on the planet to run around, bounce against the walls, hit our head against reality, try to figure it out, and then that's it. But angels live on a much longer timeline. They have much more capability to influence reality. So magic per se, and this is the 100% definition of magic. By the way, this is also the most important thing I will say tonight. So if you don't take anything else away from this, take this away, which is that the Elizabethan conception of magic is not that human beings do magic. It's that it's the whole point of magic is to contact angels in order to understand your place in the universe and petition their aid in making your life work. Because once you've discovered your orbit, once you've discovered your true will, as later magicians put it, once you've discovered your reason for existence, then you're working with the current of evolution. You're working with the universe, and life becomes magical. How many people have ever been in a period in your life where suddenly synchronicities have been coming out of the wall and all these unlikely coincidences have been happening? Raise your hand and say aye. Okay, so basically everyone. So you know exactly what I'm talking about. This is what happens when you enter into these flow states it could be through magic or it could be through, anything. It happens when you are in a flow state pursuing your true calling, which is different for everyone. It could be, writing, it could be skateboarding, it could be being a graphic artist, whatever it might happen to be. When we're in the flow of fulfilling our purpose, our nature, or as the Elizabethans would say, being in line with our holy guardian angel, that's when the universe does that to let us know that we're on the right track. Okay. So, I keep getting the Wi-Fi. So the third thing, here's where we start to get into geopolitics. The third thing that we can learn about magic from John Dee is that there is a Western esoteric tradition. There is a secret occult tradition that has been running underneath the floorboards for a couple thousand years, but in its current form, which is more or less founded on the ideas that I just described for the last 500 years, since John Dee. He's really the genesis point for the Western esoteric tradition as we currently understand it. Before Dee, it was wrapped up in the Gomorrah tradition and things like that, but there is a specific occult tradition and path that has been active in Western civilization for many hundreds of years. But we don't know about it. We've gotten little fragments of it. And it's a spiritual path as profound, or perhaps more profound, I might argue, than things like Vajrayana, Tibetan Buddhism, or Advaita Vedanta in the Eastern esoteric traditions, or Sufism, or all these esoteric paths that we have in the world. As Rene Guénon, the traditionalist author, once argued, every religion in the world has an exoteric and an esoteric branch. So there's the version of the religion for the people, the churchgoers, the people who just need to see the show. And then there's the version of the religion that's practiced behind closed doors, where people are actually investigating techniques for directly engaging with other levels of reality and altering consciousness. Example being, so obviously in Islam, there's esoteric Islam, and then there's Sufism, which is esoteric Islam. In Catholicism, there's there's esoteric Catholicism, the Catholic Church, and then there's the holy orders, the Jesuits, the Franciscans, the Dominicans, all the ones that are engaged in techniques for altering consciousness. Or in Hinduism, there's Tantra, there's external Hinduism, and then there's Tantra, the esoteric branch. Same with Buddhism. Tantra Tantra means magic, right? Tantra, so esoteric Buddhism, Vajrayana Buddhism. Now, I argue in this book, and in fact, my central thesis of this book is the Western esoteric tradition, by which I mean starting with Dee, progressing into Rosicrucianism, Freemasonry, the Golden Dawn, Thelema, Satanism, witchcraft, just some degenerated form, and various other places, is the esoteric core of Protestantism. The Western esoteric tradition is the direct counterpart of the holy orders in Catholicism. So in Catholicism, we had the Jesuits, as I mentioned, the Dominicans, the Franciscans, the ones who were in charge of leading the charge of keeping the show going and spreading Catholicism. Protestantism had the same thing. It's just called the Rosicrucians in its many forms. And it comes directly from Dee. And the whole point of the Western esoteric tradition was to create a world of intellectual freedom away from the grasp of the Catholic Church, a world in which science could flourish, a world in which people could be free to pursue their individual will, their individual true will, as I've just described, instead of being top-down dominated by a church structure, right? And so we see it not only in the Brexit, if you will, of England from Rome under Henry VIII, but we see it in the work of John Dee, and we see it with all these secret societies who spent a couple hundred years trying to break the hold of the Catholics, trying to do things like found America along Rosicrucian and Masonic ideals, like with the Freemasonic founding fathers, in order to create the world of intellectual freedom and ability for open scientific inquiry that we enjoy today. And this is a direct outpouring of Dee's work and of the Western esoteric tradition. It's not an opposition. Science is not in opposition to magic. It's the child of magic. Alchemy is the parent of science in its modern form, and Dee's the guy that stands at the crossroads of that. So now this is important because for a lot of reasons, and another reason why I wrote the book was to make this very, very clear. That there is a specific tradition with a set series of practices and a set graded system for going from step A to point A to point Z, which is based on the tree of life. And we recognize if you've ever seen, who's ever seen like Golden Dawn grades, like Adeptus Minor and Neophyte and things. Okay, so some people. That's really the system. It's a system for, the Western esotericism is a system for repairing human consciousness and taking it from a fragmented, dispersed, the prima materia of a human life as it is, a human being that is subjected to its desires and kind of all over the place. And I don't know what I want to do in my life. I don't know I'm just kind of here. The universe is inert. I feel powerless. Taking somebody like that from a state of lead to a state of gold. And the state of gold is the one that I've hinted at the beginning of this talk, which is understanding that we are in God. The whole world is God, and we are part of God in perfect connection with everything in existence, just as the Buddhists tell us, right? Very similar to Vajrayana Buddhism. By the way, and this, by the way, is the 100% definition of exactly what magic is, and also the most important thing I'm going to say tonight. So if you take away nothing else from this talk, this is the most important thing. The best way to understand the Western magic, I apologize for this in advance. The best way to understand the Western esoteric tradition and Hermeticism and Neoplatonism and all the other things it's been called is the Morrissey lyric, "Nature is a language, can't you read?" Has anyone ever heard that Smith song? Raise your hand and say aye. Okay, a couple people. Morrissey, sorry. I apologize in advance. As much as I love the Smiths, it's like, okay, I just had to throw that in there. So the idea of magic is that we are in one thing. The universe is alive. It is conscious. We are part of it. We are connected intrinsically to all of it. As above, so below. We are the mirror of the entire universe. Everything out there in the universe is a mirror of us internally. Has anyone ever seen a picture of a nebula that looks like a human eye iris? Raise your hand and say aye. Okay, there's a lot of you, right? So this is kind of what I mean by this. But the idea being that we live in a conscious universe that is holographic. And many of you probably know that if you take a hologram and a holographic image and you cut it up into lots of little pieces, like you take let's say you take a hologram of R2-D2 sticker, and you cut it up into eight pieces, all 8 of those pieces will contain the entire image of R2-D2, right? And this is how Hermeticists see the world. Every part of reality contains the totality. Or as William Blake later put it, I could see infinity in a grain of sand. And particularly the human body. But if you want to understand God, if you want to understand the universe, then you can also study the human body. And that if the better you're able to understand this, the better you're able to understand what all this is and how it all works, the better you are able to find your place in it. And from there, we have a direct arc to the dangerous and heretical idea of operational magic, which is that if Hermeticism is the idea of seeing the world as one working computer, one operating system with a perfectly guided set of rules, magic is the idea of, can we reprogram it, right? Is there a programming language, perhaps, with which we can change reality? So Hermeticists saw nature as a series of nesting analogies. So nature is a language. So the idea that, the planet Mars is similar to the human emotion of aggression and dominance seeking, is similar to the color red, is similar to the god Ares, is similar to a hawk, a bird of prey, and so on and so forth. And that all these things are in some sense analogically connected and can be used to influence each other. Or even in the idea of magic, can be used to produce specific effects. So, now, close your eyes again. So imagine yourself, as it were, at Mortlake. Not the Mortlake we're in right now, but the Mortlake that you're in now. Mortlake, of course, was the house of Dr. Dee and John Kelly in the southwest of London, on the banks of the River Thames, a quiet English suburb with clouds floating gently by overhead and the sound of the river gently lapping by the house. And John Dee and Edward Kelly spent day after day sitting in Dee's study behind closed doors with a scrying ball. And a scrying ball is simply a piece of crystal. All that scrying is, which is how they were making contact with angels, is staring into a crystal until you start to kind of trance out and go into an altered state of consciousness as you are now, right? And from that state of altered consciousness, being able to tune in to the subtle realms of reality, the realms that we normally contact only when we're in deep sleep states or in REM states, dreaming consciousness, but doing it while we're awake so that we can have more conscious control over it. Imagine being there and day after day, year after year, seeing angels coming through the scrying ball. And these angels told Dee and Kelly what reality is. They gave them the true secrets of magic, the true nature of the angelic language. But they looked at all of the Western esoteric tradition and instructions that had been passed around, and from these corrected them and gave Dee and Kelly the true system of magic through which they were to contact God. And God, as you see, was, as Dee and Kelly saw them, not just a man with a white beard up in the clouds, but imagine and see God as Dee and Kelly saw God, as a whale floating through reality, covered with eyes from head to toe, with a giant cavernous mouth from which echoed the howling sound that Dee and Kelly described as the roaring of a cave of lions. And as they entered through the mouth of the whale, they saw peeled back before them the 30 aethers, the 30 layers of reality, peeled back like an onion skin, the layers of consciousness that separate human beings from divinity, from enlightenment, which is the core of this whole thing, just like it is in the Eastern traditions. God the whale. So, day after day, month after month, year after year of talking to angels who told them the real plan, the plan of how they were going to enlighten not just Dee and Kelly, but the entire human race, which is what we're going to talk about now as soon as you begin to come back and open your eyes. Okay. So the fourth thing we can learn about magic and reality from Dee and Kelly is that it's not about you. The importance of checking your ego at the door. So, and this is a critical point. How many people here have ever done let's say, a magical ritual for trying to manifest something in your life or get something to happen? Raise your hand and say aye. Okay, so most of you. This is not that. When most people are attracted to magic, they come across chaos magic or the grimoires or various things, and the idea behind all of them is doing rituals to get stuff, a new job, a new relationship, a shiny red car, like The Secret, something like that. This is not that. Enochian magic is very different, and this is why it's been so fundamentally disturbing to so many people. Enochian magic is about humbling you. It works on two levels, sanctification and illumination. Sanctification is the moving aside a human being from their own ego, their own constructed story of who they are, and refitting them with the divine pattern of the great chain of being that I've alluded to. Reorienting them with what they truly should be doing in life instead of following desires here and there and everywhere. The other side of it is illumination, which is taking an unenlightened human being and filling them with wisdom and understanding, showing them what reality really is, and filling them with divine knowledge. But this wasn't just for any old reason. It wasn't just because they liked human beings. The idea was that the angels saw human beings as fallen and unenlightened, and just like with any other spiritual tradition, they wanted enlightenment one person at a time. They wanted human beings to be enlightened, and in order to do that, they wanted Enochian magic spread to the entire world so that people could do it and have a direct DSL connection or fiber, hopefully, connection to the divine realms without the intercessory aid of the church. A dangerous idea. And ultimately, what they truly wanted was to bring about the apocalypse. Now, the apocalypse doesn't mean the destruction of everything. It means the lifting of the veil. It means the final enlightenment through light of all sentient beings, as the Buddhists say. The Buddhists take a vow where they say they will continue to reincarnate until all sentient and insentient beings are liberated. It's the same with the angels. They want totalizing enlightenment for everybody. But the process of that does not involve getting stuff, tchotchkes. People are always constantly doing magic to get tchotchkes. This is not that. So I'm speeding up a bit here. So the fifth thing we can learn from Dee and Kelly is there is a total plan. The angels do have a plan for humanity, and it's very simple. And this is shocking, right? It's something that hasn't been written about, or it's been written about in academic texts, but not in a popular book about magic. And this is a truly shocking idea, and also the most important thing I'm going to say tonight. So if you don't take away anything else from this talk, this is the one to take away. The angels spent 10 years giving Dee and Kelly the system of Enochian magic so the human beings could develop direct lines of communication with the angels, but they did it for this reason. They wanted one totalizing religion for the entire planet. They would unify Catholicism, Protestantism, Judaism, paganism, and even Islam under the control of the angels. The angels would be put back in control of the entire planet and assert spiritual control, and that this would be done underneath Elizabeth, that Elizabeth I would be the world sovereign, the world Protestant empress, and that Dee, of course, had already laid the groundwork for this British Empire with his imperial work, but this was to be realigned with Enochian magic, and what they wanted was one world order, one religion, one empire. Now, we might say that that's perhaps fanciful, and it certainly wasn't achieved during Dee and Kelly's lifetime. But when we fast forward, let's say 500 years later, 400 years later, and we look at the spread of the British Empire and how it, for better or worse, brought Christianity across the entire planet, and we look at things like how global capitalism has perhaps become the totalizing world religion, and that we do live in one monoculture. Now, I'm not saying this is good or bad. This is a history book, remember. But once we begin to understand this, that the angels did have a plan for humanity, and they did want, they essentially wanted a spiritual Borg cube. If you remember the Borg cube from Star Trek: The Next Generation, they wanted total dominance, total control, and the reason they wanted that was because they basically were saying, okay, humans have had their chance, we're going to take the wheel. Imagine, in the Old Testament, the angels interact with human beings. They bring the 10 Commandments to Moses. Moses brings out the 10 commandments and says, okay, I've talked to God at the burning bush. Here's the 10 rules. Do these rules and everything will be fine. I've established the covenant with humanity. As long as you do this, all will be fine. Okay, not so easy. Fast forward several hundred years. And how did that go? Not very well. It's descended into, the covenant has been broken in various places in the Old Testament. So God says, okay, let's try this again. Sends down Christ, whether you believe this was a real figure or not. And, Christ shows up and says, okay, I see you're having some problems following the rules. Okay, you guys have kind of, the letter killeth, but the spirit giveth life. You guys have gotten wrapped up in kind of rules lawyering this. So let's make it easier. Okay, I'm just going to give you one overall commandment. Love your neighbor as yourself, right? And what this means is human consciousnesses are fundamentally the same, right? We're all one consciousness interspersed with different loci, but we're deep down at the level of breath, at the level of awareness, being, bliss, consciousness, as the Hindus put it, or the Sanatana Dharma puts it. We are the same. We're one consciousness expressing itself through different loci, right? So love your neighbor as yourself, because you are another me, right? This is the meaning of that statement. So as long as we remember that and we love each other, you can't really go wrong, because you're not going to be running around killing and maiming and hurting and stealing and all the other commandments. Now, you might have imagined that probably would have worked really well, but, fast forward about 15 minutes and he's nailed up on a piece of wood, and, it's just chaos and mayhem from there. And then fast forward another 100 years and they're using it as an excuse to, pave over whole other cultures and establish the church and misinterpret everything and so on and so forth. Okay. God is nothing if not patient, so let's give it another try. Okay. Islam, right? The Prophet Muhammad. The Archangel Gabriel, who, by the way, is one of the core angels of the Enochian sessions, comes down and says, okay, this time just write down exactly what I'm saying, all right? Just literally just take dictation. You don't change it. Don't put your spin on it. You don't get to, I'm not going to have you speak in parables or whatever. Just write, okay? I'll give you exactly what to say. And that's the Quran, which Muhammad spends, a year or so or a couple of years in a cave transcribing, allegedly. And okay, fast forward a few hundred years, that's not going so great either. So we can take perhaps the Enochian sessions as the angels finally saying, okay, look, let's try this on a one-to-one basis. We're going to give you the technology for establishing the connection directly with us instead of human intermediaries. No more books, no more churches, or at least in addition to that. We're just going to here's the plug. Stick your finger in the plug and we'll take it from there, right? And the whole idea with Enochian was, and of course, to do the Enochian system, you have to build what's called the Holy Table of Practice, which is a 3 foot by 3 foot cube, upon which is a crystal ball, and it's kind of the world's most complicated Ouija board. And in fact, when we see what I might call step-down artifacts of occultism, whether that's crystal balls or numerology or fortune telling or dream analysis or any of these other things that we see kind of in the margins of the newspaper or in, street corner psychics and things like that. These are decayed echoes of the Western esoteric tradition. These things all had a specific purpose within the Western magical system. But over time, those have kind of filtered out and become kind of degenerated echoes. So tarot suddenly becomes not a system for, understanding the structure of reality, but now becomes a system for fortune telling. But the Holy Table of Practice is very much like a Ouija board. And they basically say we want one of these in every, house in the world. And we want, just like a TV would be, and we want people using these to make direct contact with us, at least in addition to the structure of the church, so they don't go too far off the deep end. And then using this, Enochian Magick, we're gonna actualize the whole thing. We're gonna bring humanity back to its fundamental state of awareness, pristine, original awareness, as they say in the Dzogchen tradition, enlightenment, and then we're going to wrap up the show. It's over. Monkeys had your chance. Sorry. And that's really what the angels say. And they're saying this in the 15th century. They're saying the end is near. And this is now the sixth thing we can learn from D. and Kelly. The end of the world is nigh. And the angels are saying, the time of Antichrist is here. The time of total spiritual degradation, the Kali Yuga, as is said in Sanatana Dharma. And the end of the world is coming. Now, this is always what happens with the end of the world. People always think it's tied to a specific date. So Dee and Kelly thought that it was going to happen in 1588. Later, people thought that it would happen in 1688. Ronald Reagan thought it would happen in 1988. But humans always think that the apocalypse is coming at a specific date. And we still see people in the news, whatever that guy's name, Harold something, who was saying the end of the world was going to be a couple years ago. It's not a date. The end of the world, as many people have pointed out, is an ongoing process, right? It's the final disintegration of the human project. It's the final disintegration of human consciousness to its most debased point, to a point of unrealization and disconnection from the traditional order, the great chain of being. Where now, if we look around, people don't even believe in the spiritual realm at all anymore. They certainly don't believe in religion. They don't believe in that there's really anything or any meaning to life outside of pure materialism and materialist science, and which is great, right? But is only part of the big picture. And they don't believe that there is anything outside of living for today and getting a few more Instagram followers and fulfilling our base needs, right? So this is what they were writing about in the scriptures as the end of the world. It's what the Hindu sages were writing about with the Kali Yuga. Or if you read the Hindu scriptures on the Kali Yuga, they basically give a perfect spot-on description of the world as it is now. They say, just as it is in the book of Revelation, the waters will be poisoned, the airs will be poisoned, people will have only filth to eat, right? Processed food, all chemicals, all of this. People will no longer have access to real spiritual traditions. People will openly worship demons, right? And this is the nadir of human, nadir, not Ralph Nader, but the lowest point of human, the arc of human progress. And this is a truly disturbing thing that we get from traditional forms of esoteric spirituality, whether it's Dee or some of the Hindu systems, which is that human beings are not progressing, right? We're not, as the New Age assures us in airbrushed tones of wanting to sell us some crystals or whatever. The New Age assures us that we're all progressing to some great spiritual moment of awakening and enlightenment. That it used to be 2012. I don't know what people say now, but we're progressing to, it's going to be great. It's out in the future. Everyone's waking up. We're all getting totally, more conscious. It's not so, right? Human beings are receding and digressing into baser and baser and baser matter and materialism. And the message of the angels is this is the end of the world, right? The end of the world is not, nuclear weapons falling out of the sky. It's when human beings have forgotten their true nature, right? And out of the forgetfulness of human beings lose the golden thread. They forget what they are, which is divinity manifest in flesh, right? With direct connection back to everything else, everything that I've just said. And when human beings forget who they are, and from that all other evils proceed. Because when you forget your own divine nature, when you forget that we're all one consciousness, how much easier does it become to hurt other people? How much easier does it become to pump chemicals into the environment? How much easier does it become to torment and torture animals for food or cosmetics or whatever, How much easier does it become to destroy the Garden of Eden for short-term profit? And not to make it political, that's only one example, right? But when we forget who we are and we think there's only matter, then it becomes easier you start to see other people as things. And this is forgetfulness. In Hinduism, they say evil is basically stupidity. Ignorance, it's stupidity. It's not being aware of the nature of reality. And one of the things you get if you interact with people in other cultures, non-Western cultures, is in a lot of places like Thailand, for instance, or certain parts of India, not to over-romanticize, but people get it. They remember that. They haven't lost the thread. In some cases, not all cases, obviously. So the message of the angels is, if it's the end of the world, then it's time to wrap it up. It's time to start exercising some extreme measures, in this case, Enochian Magick, to wake people back up and restart the siphon back in the other direction, right? So instead of the siphon pouring out and wasting all of human potential, it restarts in the other direction and goes back up towards its parent source, backwards through history instead of forwards. Okay. So number 7, the last one. Thank you for bearing with me here, as we've been all over the known universe. This is no different. The Western occult tradition is no different from the mainstream Western political project. This is shocking to realize. If you look at the American evangelicals, certainly for the last 100 years, the evangelical right has, really been on the same page here, just not in a mystical way. And now, obviously, these ideas, we can see these ideas echoing into the creation of America, the creation of the British Empire, the creation of the American Empire, but we can also see it in American foreign policy in the Middle East. And what you have to realize if you want to understand the world is that the people in charge of the show, for instance, Ronald Reagan, Mike Pence, people like this, have been trying to do this quite directly. The people in charge of in not all cases, but in many cases, of setting Western foreign policy have very literally believed that we are in the end of the world and that the events of the apocalypse can be hastened physically by progressing the timeline towards apocalypse. And this, I argue in the book, is the wrong interpretation because it's a physical interpretation of it and literal interpretation rather than an esoteric interpretation. But when you consider things, for instance, like Ronald Reagan in the 1980s leading the world into a mutually assured destruction with Russia, or a policy of mutually assured destruction, and telling the world that it was his divinely ordained role to shepherd America through the end times in confrontation with Gog and Magog, which is from the book of Daniel, but he said represented Russia. When you consider that the reason we went into Iraq, both for the first and second Iraq wars, was this idea of basically terraforming the Middle East to prompt the events of the book of Revelation to happen. George W. Bush very much believed this, as it's called, dispensationalist view of religious interventionalism. Or Bush very famously, the second Bush very famously said to Jacques Chirac, the French prime minister, that when I look at the Middle East and Iraq, I see Gog and Magog at work. And it's happening again now. It's always happening now with the invasion of Syria, which fulfills prophecy in the book of Isaiah. And it's quite terrifying and sobering to realize that these aren't just ideas that are sitting in books. These are ideas that people with nuclear weapons are taking quite seriously. And it's sobering to realize that, for instance, if we had come to worldwide thermonuclear Armageddon in the 1980s, all of the missiles propelling the nukes would literally have been propelled by the jet fuel designed by Jack Parsons, right? And so, we could be here for another hour, and I'll mercifully spare you getting into the details on the history. But I just want to hint at this so you can follow up on it in the book. That the Western esoteric tradition and exoteric, the religions and the apocalyptic religions and mainstream political movements have all been on the same page, which is the advancement of the world towards the apocalypse, literally, which is why everything is so fucked. And I argue in the book that it's way too literalist, for obvious reasons. So, all right. So I've been all over the place, but the reason that I structured this talk in this way is I didn't want to just talk at you about who John Dee was for an hour. I've done tons of podcasts. You can read the book. It's like, okay, like I could have literally sat here talking about, he went and worked for this king and then they did the scrying session. It would be boring as fuck, right? So, what I wanted to do instead was present to you the core ideas that surfaced from working on this book and why they're important and why they relate to us now. And those can all be followed up on in John Dee and the Empire of Angels. So, Look the other way. And on that note, thank you very much. I'll take it. Look backwards, not forwards. Okay, so I will. If anyone is still if you want to get up and shake out, it's awesome. Please do. But if anyone has questions, I'll take them now.
So I had heard that Dee was actually told by the angels not to ever use the magic. I don't know if a friend recently told me that, but he said he looked at it. Is there any truth to that or anything?
It's not that they were never supposed to use the magic. It's that, all of the, and this is why the book is not just about John Dee. The first 2/3 of this book are about John Dee, and the last third is about the Golden Dawn, Aleister Crowley, and Jack Parsons, right, and the Babylon working, which is a whole other kettle of fish. What really happened there was, since they spent almost 10 years in the sessions, but that was just enough time to just transmit the blueprint, right? And what they were given was the blueprint for building that scrying table and the context of what it was to be used for. But they didn't have a whole lot of time left to actually turn it on, right? So if you imagine, it's like, okay, here's the schematics for the nuke, right? But they never actually switch it on. And it wasn't until, so there was kind of very likely a secret tradition running after Dee that goes through Elias Ashmole, who's the kind of founder of modern Freemasonry, and various nobility high up in the ranks in English society, but all the way into the Golden Dawn. So people were kind of doing it covertly behind closed doors. But it's not until actually Aleister Crowley that we get the record, which I spend so much time on in this book, of somebody actually going through the Aethers and doing the actual magical system. And that's in the early part of the 20th century. So it wasn't, I don't think they were told not to do it, but they were told to do it, but only in specific circumstances. And they never actually got into progressing through working the actual system. They basically just transmitted it, and then the history progresses from there. Yeah.
There was an article in Gnosis magazine back in the 70s or 80s. Donald Tyson stated that Enochian Magick was bring about the end of the world.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's reprinted in the end of his book, Enochian Magick for Beginners. So, and it's I think it's called The Apocalypse Working. So in that book, so there's an 18-day ritual. It's when you build the scrying table, which takes a long time. You're then supposed to do a 14 to 18-day ritual, which attunes you to the system. Donald Tyson quite notoriously says that this was the apocalypse working, and that if you did it, it would end the world. Well, I did it, and whether the world ended or not is arguable, but I'll dodge that one. But so Tyson, that's a really good book, Enochian Magick for Beginners, but I think he's a little overdramatic with it. And I will, instead of addressing that specifically, I'll give you my broader take on a lot of these things. So if you read a lot of these magical books, and not just books on magic like the Grimoires, but if you also go back and you look at, for instance, Indian yoga or Hindu yoga manuals, right? They will have very fantastical descriptions of things that are supposed to happen, right? So here's a classic example. In the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, which is the classical manual on yoga, they list all the various cities that one is supposed to obtain by advanced yoga practice, which means asana, pranayama, which is heavy breathing and all this. And they list these cities as, there's one that's, jumping about like a frog. And then at one point they say that you'll learn how to fly, right? If you do pranayama exercises for a year and get to the point where you can slow your breath down to 2 minutes per breath, something like that. They say that you'll learn how to fly. And in the modern world, we have groups like, I don't want to get too, well, we have groups like TM, right? Transcendental Meditation, that maintain this is literally true, right? That you'll learn how to fly. Okay, but what did that actually mean? Well, in my experience, it means that you get so high that you feel like you don't have a body, right? That you're just floating, right? So you feel like you're flying. Now, are you actually flying? No, right? But this is what you see with the grimoires, and also the grimoire tradition, like the Goetia and things like this. You see all these very fantastical descriptions of magical powers that you get. And has anyone ever seen those magic eye paintings? Raise your hand and say aye. You blur your eyes in it. So I actually think that those magic eye paintings must have been designed by some hidden occult master. But no, really, because they're almost the most visceral example possible of how magic actually works, where it seems like chaos, but then you just look at it slightly differently and it all comes into focus. Magic is like that. These old books are like that. So example being, this thing about flying. Okay, well, it doesn't make any sense, but then you actually do the practice and you're like, oh yeah, flying. It feels like flying, right? Or, some of these results in these grimoires and things like that. And so I think it's kind of the same with Enochian in this case, where it's like, oh, it'll cause the apocalypse. Well, what is apocalypse in Greek means lifting of the veil, right? So it does cause the apocalypse, right? But not in the sense of bombs falling out of the sky, which is what the error that dispensationalist Christians have made, thinking that it's literal. It causes the apocalypse in the sense that it utterly destroys your whole narrative of your life. It destroys who you think you are, your story of who you think you are. It just like a high dose of LSD would, or something like that. It eats away and destroys the person that you call you. And why is that? Well, because from the day we're born, we start to build up this kind of this voodoo doll, if you will. We build up this idea of who we are, this patchwork assumption of, from when I first was conscious, I built up this thing called Jason, right? It was assembled from things people had told me about who I was, parents, teachers, peers, the media, TV, books I read, people that I wanted to be, that I wanted to reflect something that I'd seen into and incorporated into my personality. And all throughout my teens, and particularly when we're teenagers, we become obsessed with this process. And all throughout my 20s and all of this, I was building this thing, this monstrosity called Jason, right? It was just a patchwork thing. Then you do something like Enochian and it's gone. Fuck, right? I'm breathing. I'm just breath and awareness, and I'm experiencing this. And it's the apocalypse. The veil is lifted. It's like, well, I'm just here, and all of that is just the ape of Thoth, right? It's just a story. It's just something that was built up and created. It becomes like a blinker. We need it up to a point in order to survive, because we couldn't mature and grow and be able to survive without that. But after a point, it becomes the thing that's keeping you from perceiving reality, right? So at least that's my perspective with it. Donald Tyson says Cthulhu will literally come back and eat your face. So if somebody does that and that happens, then who am I to say otherwise, right? I hope that answers your question.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure. Okay.
Nowadays, there's a plethora of Enochian tools you can buy. Is that going to work as well, in your opinion, as opposed to making your own stuff?
Well, you can do Enochian with no tools, and we're going to do that tomorrow. We're going to go through the first day there. We're not going to use any tools. But the actual answer is you should start with whatever's easiest, because if you get into making the tools, a year is going to go by, and all you're going to have been doing is making tools, which I ended up doing. But I did print in the book. You can see you can reap the rewards of my labor, because I printed all the. I painstakingly reassembled all the watchtowers on Photoshop for like months, and so they're in the book for you to use. So you can start with tools made out of paper, as Londiket points out. But what I will say is that when you make the tools, the important part of it is that you're attuning yourself to the system, right? When you make something, you understand it in an experiential, hands-on way, because you made it. And you spent all this time and labor basically meditating on it by making it, right? So the whole point of the Enochian system is to, it really becomes a map where at first none of it makes sense. But again, it's like the magic eye painting, where as you make it, you begin to understand how it all fits together and why everything is where it is. It becomes beautifully, precise in that. But the process of making it kind of attunes you to what it actually is, if that makes sense. Yeah, so. But and then it's kind of like, I don't know, it's like, it's good to start with nothing. And then, as time goes on, if you become more involved in it, proceed to making your own stuff. But okay, it's a lot of work. So fair warning. Yeah. Okay, yes?
How does Buddhism work with Enochian magic?
I think that Buddhism works actually having a Buddhist framework on any magical system helps it work a lot better. And the reason I say that is because the core insight of the Buddha, right, is that everything is empty. And that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It doesn't mean nihilism. It means that everything is empty of inherent existence. So right now you and I are interacting, right? And who we each are in this interaction is not the same as we would be interacting with anyone else in this room. It's not the same as we're going to be when we're outside of the context of this room and go to get food, or you now is not the same person as you will be tomorrow. So the whole point of the whole, as many of you know, I'm sure, the whole a core insight of the Buddha is that there's no essential quality to anything, which flies in the face of both Hinduism and Hermeticism, Neoplatonism. The whole point of the Buddha is, look, it's not the nodes, it's the connections, right? It's the web, if that makes sense. Meaning, and the reason this was important was because the Hindu sages had spent thousands of years trying to find the Atman, trying to find the core essence of an internal human being. As soon as I find that, as soon as I find my true self, as soon as I find the real me, then I'm enlightened. And the Buddha said, there's no real you. Like, this is a search in vain, because you're different depending on each context that you're in, to the point where, you can't be said, if you were to take me and put me in a blank room for 30 years, what is that? It's not this, right? And that's not enlightenment. So now the reason this is important is because this turns out, practically speaking, to be very, very useful for magic. And the reason that it's useful is because when people do magic, they really easily get suckered into thinking that they've figured something out, or thinking that something is true, or thinking that they've discovered the essential nature of something. Or if you go at something with the framework of emptiness, it's just, you understand that it's just a light show, and you don't get overly hypnotized by it, if that makes sense.
Actually, it does. It's the natural rate of perfection. It is. One.
Right? Well, and the zero not zero, and the 0 equals 2 is the way to put it. But yeah, and I think that these system, as I talk about in the book, I relate it to Vajrayana, and I relate it to some of the stuff that Ken Wilber said, and I think that it maps up with Buddhism at a certain point pretty well. I don't know enough about the technical side. I know who he is, but I don't know enough about the technical side of what he's teaching. He's a Dzogchen teacher, right? I don't know enough to say, comment about that intelligently. Yes?
First off, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
So, do we have an idea about how often they were in contact with angels in a progressive way? If there was more in the beginning of the 10 years of work, if there was more in the end, and what was a typical workday like in the great work of John Dee?
That's a great question. So, pretty much all day, every day, right? I mean, really, and their typical workday is they would do, and they did do more in the beginning. But a typical workday they would probably spend 2 to 3 sessions a day contacting angels, for sessions that would last about an hour each. And the early sessions are, which is pretty much how long magical ritual lasts. I mean, it's probably an hour tops. And they're taking back notes from each session, and you can read these in the diaries. All the notes were all kept immaculately, which is very rare for this type of thing. But as time goes on, the angels start to get more and more frustrated with Dee and Kelly, because they keep giving them specific instructions that they don't follow. So things happen like they start sleeping in and not going to sessions. And then they'll do things like, okay, here's an instruction for making the ring and the lamin for the system. And then a month goes by, and the angels are like, where's the ring and the lamin? And they're like, look, we had some issues getting some materials and things like that. And then they really get frustrated, because Dee and Kelly are like, look, this is a lot of work. Can you manifest some money for us? And the angels are like, dude, you spent the last 30 years of your life doing nothing but trying to figure out how to get here and talk to the angels, and now you are complaining and you want money from us. Are you serious? To which Kelly responds, well, what if we just borrow money? He literally asked this. So there's some communication breakdowns along the way. But once they pretty much hold to that schedule for the first 2 years, at which point they've transmitted most of the furniture. And then it changes up a lot because they then build the furniture and they take it with them, and they move from England to the continent, and they're going around Europe trying to interest various monarchs, particularly Rudolph II, in participating in the sessions and trying to draw in various political actors in, following out their plan and kind of trying to draw other people into witnessing the sessions. And so they're kind of mobile and on a mission from God, if you will, like the Blues Brothers, and kind of moving around, and it becomes a lot different at that point.
Second part is the 18-day ritual in your book, and if so, what's the workload like for that, as well as like how much time spent?
I discuss it in the book, but this is not a practical workbook. It's the history. But the ritual is printed in 2 different forms. It's in one form in Jeffrey James, The Enochian Evocation of Dr. John Dee, and it's in Donald Tyson's book, Enochian Magick for Beginners. And basically, it's kind of a ritual that you have to build the whole thing first, and then it's kind of like you go through and you consecrate every single part of the system. So, and most of it is focused around essentially calling up the angels of each particular quadrant of the watchtower, of the watchtowers, which are the elemental tables on top of the whole thing, until you basically called out all the angels. And then at which point I will point out, they then say you no longer need the furniture. They say that you build the furniture, which could take a huge amount of time. Then you do the ritual, and then you don't need the furniture anymore. So to your point, actually, the whole process of building the furniture is kind of like, well, you build the map internally by building it physically, and then you do the ritual, and then it's locked in, and then you don't need the furniture anymore. So it becomes like a mnemonic study tool, sort of. So I hope that answers your question. But it causes the apocalypse, so don't do it. Learn from my mistake. Any more questions?
All right, I hope you really enjoyed that. You can catch the second part of this workshop, the day-long class on how to actually do Enochian magic, including how to scry Enochian aethers and all that great stuff, at magick.me, magick.me. And of course, as part of a subscription package, you get access to close to 20 classes and office hours, which are coming up Saturday after this one, and the Magician's Workshop and the Discord, and lots more courses to come. It's all there for you. So I will see you in class. And until then, I honor you. I really, really enjoy doing this show for you and serving you. And I can't wait to see you next time. All right.